So I'm Beth. This is Rebekah. And Rebekah's joining me. She's my daughter. We are going to be talking bread today. And I have made bread, lots of bread, challah bread, bread for pizza, bread for sandwiches. I used to make bread quite a lot, but I don't make bread quite so much anymore. And Rebekah has started making sourdough bread. Mm-hmm. And it's yummy.
It's getting there.
It's getting there. So I had been wanting to get back into making bread anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I am used to making yeast breads. And my daughter and my daughter-in-law, different people are on this. Let's do the sourdough thing. So I have a challenge before me because in a couple of weeks, I need to have some bread to take to an event that I'm attending. So I'm going to make some bread the old-fashioned way, and Rebekah's going to help me get my sourdough starter going.
So here's why sourdough is like all the craze right now and why a lot of people are going back to it. Back in the day, for thousands of years, we didn't have instant yeast. Right. We didn't have that. Mm-hmm. So what they did was you created sourdough starter. It like captures like different cultures from the air where you live, and it like builds up, and you've got yeast now, and you can keep it alive. There's literally sourdough starter from, I think you can go to San Francisco and actually buy this. You can buy some that are from the miners back in like the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
They still have some. So you can create one sourdough starter and you can pass it on from generation to generation,
if you
literally.
Treat it nice, you can keep it alive for hundreds of years.
Yes.
Okay.
And so like I thought that was a really cool thing that I learned. I was like, oh my gosh, you can go and you can buy hundreds of year old sourdough starter.
So, I mean, having the instant yeast is really neat because, like, I need bread and I don't have sourdough starter. Now I could probably get some, but so this is a pretty cool experiment. And different flavors,
It's more tangy, it's more rich. Another reason why it's a good idea to go back to making bread with sourdough, it's fermented, so it's going to be better for your gut health. And so a lot of people will find it helps them with all kinds of health issues, allergies and whatnot. Mm-hmm. A lot of people who are gluten sensitive are finding that they can safely eat sourdough bread. Right. For those who are more sensitive, they might prefer to do whenever you're baking your bread and you have to let it rise, doing a bulk rise. The longer you let your sourdough bread dough rise, the more the gluten breaks down.
Okay.
And it's easy. So there are people that they'll do it like a 24 to 48 hour bulk rise. And it's easier for them to eat. Now, if you have celiac, maybe still stay away. Yeah. Just don't do it.
That's a no-go. Yeah.
But for the rest of us,
if it's just a sensitivity and you find, because I do have a lot of my clients, or when we had the herb shop, we had customers and clients who would go to Europe and they would eat the bread there and not have any problems. Mm-hmm. They'd come back to the United States and they can't eat the bread. So tell me what we need to get sourdough going.
Okay, so all you need for sourdough starter is literally flour and water and a jar.
A jar. That's it. Okay. So I asked her what size jar, and she's like, literally any size jar, because I'm going to start off with half a cup of flour, half a cup of water. And some people want to start with a cup of flour and a cup of water, and I would probably recommend that for somebody who has a bigger family. Mm-hmm. But it's just me and my husband.
Yeah. So half a cup would probably be good. Now, there's different ways to hydrate your sourdough starter, like different ratios for flour and water. I have not played around with anything except for what's called 100% hydration, which is equal parts flour, equal parts water.
Okay.
And so that's all I know.
Okay. So how did you get started? Because you were telling me that you looked at several different websites, their different recipes and what they were doing. Tell me first, before we talk about the recipe, whose flour are you using?
I'm currently using King Arthur's organic all-purpose flour. That's what I've been using. I will eventually be experimenting with other things like maybe rye or whole wheat or maybe some Kamut. Some people use einkorn.
So speaking of Kamut, so to make this restarting making bread just a little bit harder, I'm going to be using Kamut, and I'm going to grind my own wheat, because when I made bread, so you see here I've got the wheat berries. This is Kamut wheat berries. I don't actually have any flour. When I made bread eons ago, that's what I did. I ground my own wheat. And so that's what I'm going to do again. So I'm going to do both my sourdough starter and my yeast bread using Kamut. This is organic Kamut. And so I'm using the organic Kamut because, again, ages ago when I was making bread on a regular basis, einkorn wasn't a thing. I didn't even know never heard of it. So Kamut was the ancient grain that was around that I could get at that time. So that's what I'm going to use. Now, I got several different size jars because I wanted to, say, oh, you can use whatever. And like, this is a jar that I got my honey in. The label came off. And so I always save my jars. And so this is a small mouth jar. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to use that. You can.
I wouldn't recommend it.
But it's because of the having to discard, we recommend if you can get a wide mouth jar, no matter whether you start small or large, do wide mouth. So I'm going to actually start with this because I'm going to do half a cup. And whose recipe did you get?
I followed Mary's Nest. She's on YouTube and she's got her own food blog. What I really loved about hers was most people recommend using a scale. That way you can get exact measurements. The more exact, the better. But I don't have a scale at home. So I like her because she had it in cups. So I started out with half a cup of flour. And what I did to make sure I get the 100% hydration is she recommended scooping loose flour into your measuring cup.
Okay.
So that it's not compact. So just loosely scooping it and then scraping off the top. That's my flour. I poured that into my jar, and then with that same measuring cup, instead of getting a traditional liquid measuring cup, I just used that same dry measuring cup, and I filled it with some water. Don't use tap water. If that's all you have, then you can either boil it and then let it sit till it's room temperature, or you can let it sit on the counter overnight to let the chlorine evaporate from it.
Oh, yeah, I remember having to do that with my fish tank.
Yeah, so you can do that, or I was using distilled water, but I just learned that's a no-no for feeding your sourdough. So you don't want distilled and you don't want reverse osmosis because that removes too many of the minerals.
Oh, I have reverse osmosis.
So it would be better to use spring water.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Or just purified, I think.
So does that mean I have to go buy spring water since I have a reverse osmosis system in my house?
You might.
I might. Okay, I just learned something new.
I mean, I was using distilled and it was fine.
Okay.
But I've noticed I'm starting to get better results since switching to the spring water just within the last few days.
Okay. So there are occasions that since as a natural health person anyway, I'm like, okay, so we use distilled water for this and we use spring water for that. So this is one of those learning moments where I have just learned because I'm going, oh, I've got reverse osmosis. It's nice and clean. And now I'm going, oh, okay, I gotta get. So I'll have to put that on my grocery list to get spring water, but I'm going to start with the reverse osmosis water.
It'll be fine for right now.
Okay, no big deal. Okay, so then after we get started, we want to cover our jar, you said.
You want to cover it loosely. So you can some people just use a towel, some people use whatever. So I tend to use either a coffee filter or a paper towel, and I just cover it and then get a rubber band or a mason jar ring and put it on to help protect it from things like bugs and dust, because like the first time I did it, after a couple days I ended up with a little gnat in my
a friend
came to visit and I was like, oops. So now I keep it covered. We're gonna grind your wheat berries, we're gonna get that flour in the water, we're gonna mix them up, and then we're just gonna let this sit for 2 whole days.
2 whole days. Before I add more.
Before you do anything else.
Okay.
You're going to let it sit in a warm room. 70 to 80 degrees room is best.
We're in Georgia. Welcome to warm.
So some people, if it's a colder where you live, you can always put it in like a microwave that you're not going to use. Or some people put it in the oven with the oven light on. Just make sure you don't bake it. Right. I saw where someone made a little Emperor Cusco sign. Like they drew Emperor Cusco from the Emperor's New Groove, and he's like, no touchy. And they put it on their oven so people knew to don't touch it. So idea. Just somewhere warm. We'll let it sit for a couple days, and then on the 3rd day we can move on to the next steps.
Okay, we're gonna break here and go grind our wheat.